So my name's Doug. I'm the customer success manager here at Meez, well, one of them. And with me is my colleague, also in customer success, Sergio. And today we're going to talk about inventory. We're coming at this from two different angles. Me myself, been helping kind of train and onboard a lot of people onto Meez inventory. Have a lot of tips and tricks, and today we're really going to go into some of the actual nuts and bolts. Like this is very much a workshop. We're gonna actually do some of this inputting. So hopefully a lot of you will have your Meez account up and you can kind of follow along. We'll send the recording of this afterwards. So everyone who's signed in today will get a recording of it so you can follow along after the fact. We have a lot of help videos and walkthroughs that I can also make sure everyone has access to after this. So yeah, the goal today is really to get a good handle about the nuts and bolts of inventory and make sure everyone kind of leaves here with a good idea about their plan for this month with a hope to be able to execute inventory, by the end of the month.
Yep. Um, and I wanted to mention, Doug and I have been doing a few of these webinars. I'm sure you guys have been on, I'm sure somebody here has been on more than one, but I'm doing a little bit of role playing here today, which is I'm the crusty old guy, which didn't take a lot of role playing. I'm the old guy here, and I'm basically going to talk about do an inventory the old school way, or essentially talking about going from sheet and paper, pen and paper, to an Excel sheet like I used to use at my old business, which would become gargantuan. There are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of rows here, columns, three different sheets because we would use three different computers, three different columns here for putting in counts that would all aggregate and count. So anyway, it's extremely chaotic, extremely messy. I think a lot of you can empathize with this, with the kind of document that would literally take 2 to 3 weeks at the beginning of the month to start setting up for end of month count so that we had fairly accurate costs, so that we didn't spend all night doing inventory, not even knowing if we were looking at the correct costs with some kind of confidence. I'm sure everybody can relate to that pain, and we're going to dive right in now.
Yeah. So I guess Sergio, what kinds of like pains were you experiencing using Excel? A lot of people who I meet in Meez, they are coming from an Excel world. And so I
Yeah.
guess like, kind of frame what we're doing here around, what a lot of people are doing currently and that way we can when we're looking to Meez, we can see what kinds of issues we're correcting and how we're correcting them.
Yeah, of course. I mean, Excel's a great tool for getting a lot of data in one place. And when you're one person working alone in it, and I think most people can usually agree to that pretty quickly, you spend all this time building a numerical masterpiece in Excel, whether it's your inventory or a costing sheet. And as soon as somebody else uses it, you are nervous that they're going to break formulas, that they're going to be entering data into the wrong cells, all of these things. So with the kind of sheets that we used, I mean, the main pain points were the fact that we had such a large inventory, so many different sections. So we would duplicate it onto, like I said, three different laptops that would get shared, and somebody walking around the store, usually one person counting, the other person entering it right in. Trying to avoid even then, and we're going back about 10 to 15 years, trying to avoid anything written and then transcribed, because that, of course, can create just that it's creating additional time to entry, and creating that additional opportunity for a mistake, for somebody to misread my 5 as an S or my 7 as God knows what, or whatever. So it was definitely always a tandem enter it, but you can see the pains, the challenges that would happen there, um, you know, with finding that one item that isn't on the inventory sheet yet. How do we enter that in? Is it going to be entered across the sheet that's finally going to total everything? Finding an item that is put in by the pound, but we only have whole cases of it that don't have the weight of it. We just want to count the three cases. Um, Anything like that, whether it's a unit of measure, are the cost up to date, new items on the sheet, and pack size is correct that I've entered, or is my staff assuming that they're counting 24-pound cases when they're actually counting 10-pound cases?
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so, a lot of the time that's very similar to what I hear from our customers and when they come in to Meez, what they're failing to do a lot of the time is really find the time to adequately prepare for every inventory. And that's a big part of it, is tying the data properly, right? Like spending time manually updating costs in a spreadsheet is just killer. Like it's just gonna ruin your month. So
Yeah.
how we can do this more dynamically is really why we're talking today. So I think without further ado, let's dive into how we go about this. Does that work for you, Sergio?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely.
So I'm going to share my screen. Just so everyone knows, this is meant to be interactive. If you have questions, chat them in there. We can also potentially, I think, raise hands and have speaking questions. So no need to save them for the end. If you have questions as we're going along, happy to answer them as we go. All right, so for those who have inventory with Meez, you should be able to locate your inventory section by clicking on the three lines at the top left here, the little hamburger we call it, and going down to inventory. And then your inventory product will be separated out by location. So if you have 3 locations in your account and you've signed up for inventory for all 3, you'll see a drop down for 2. I have 2 right now. I'm going to stick with my South Portland location. I've already created some lists, and when I say lists, I mean sheet to shelf areas. So most customers come in and they want to count in the most efficient way possible, which tends to be the sheet to shelf to sheet areas. So dry storage, liquor, meat freezer, however your restaurant's set up, however your business is set up, being able to put in the items according to like geographical location, right? Because that way everyone can just go in, take an area, and count. If you have items that live in multiple areas, that's fine. You can add them to multiple lists. To create a brand new count sheet, just go to the plus new at the top here. And you'll have an option for count sheet, just like you have to create a recipe book, etc. Create count sheet, pick which location you want. So I'll stick with South Portland. And, we'll just call this, fridge. Because I need a new name for it. There we go. All right.
If I can quickly interrupt, Doug, just wanted to call out, if anybody who is on this call, who obviously either we invited you or you've been thinking about inventory, if you are currently an inventory customer and when Doug shows that drop down where inventory is, if for any reason you believe you are paying for inventory and you don't see it on your account, message us on this chat, message us on the chat during the call, and we'll make sure that your account does have that. It's something that often you may find when you sign on has not been activated yet during the very initial setup. So just let us know. And Doug, if you can just highlight that, just show that from the hamburger at the top left. If right when you hover that, there's a little pink button that says upgrade, and you are in fact a new customer with inventory feature, we turn it on when we start getting your costs in and you're ready to roll.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm now in a count sheet, meaning I click this plus new, I created a new count sheet here. Or from inventory, I went to my, my new, fridge, and I click these 3 dots to edit the template. I want you to remember edit template because this will come back later. What we're doing here is setting up templates for our inventory. If I click edit template, I'm now faced with a blank screen with a search bar. And what I'm doing is searching my database, my own account. So if I click back to, like, for instance, my home screen, I have the ability under my South Portland location to add 136 recipes, 373 ingredients in any way I want. All right. If I typed in sugar, for instance, and I have a few options, the green apples are the ones that are in my account. If I add one like that, it brings in the ingredient and it brings in the unit of measure. And the unit of count is actually pulling from the page for sugar. So if I click on and I go to sugar, it's taking it from the purchase unit here. So however I'm buying it is how we're automatically letting you count it. Okay. Now, if you were to add something that is brand new, if I type in sugar and I create a new ingredient, meaning like I don't have turbinado sugar here, I'm going to add that. It's a Meez logo, means it's definitely not in my account, means it definitely doesn't have costs. If I click that, you'll see it's going to give me an error message. Not yet set with the cost, and the unit's going to be each. So you're going to want to go in and you're going to want to click on this turbinado sugar, and you're going to want to add a cost directly here. Or if you use invoice processing with us, you can go back to your table and you can search turbinado sugar on your new purchase items, and you can link it to one of your invoice items. Okay. But it's really important to make sure you check these error messages as you go. That's, you want these to be costed. They have to be costed or they're not going to spit out any data for you. Okay.
So Doug, when you added that sugar, where did the 30-pound case come from?
It came from the ingredient page. So this page here, ingredient costs, if I go to the sugar, I can actually click this link here and it brings me right to the page, and you'll see that the purchase unit for the location I'm using, that's where it comes from. Now, this is where things get kind of interesting. You might not want to count by the case, or you might think my team, when they see this, they're not going to be sure what this means. I'd rather them count by the pound. That's easy enough. You can click change it to pound. And the reason you can do that and it won't mess up any calculations is because we're sticking with the same unit type. I call it unit type. It's the easiest way to kind of think about it. If I go back to sugar and I click on this U of M equivalency, unit types are weight, volume, and each. And because my cost is in pounds, meaning the case is in pounds, I can switch between any type of weight I want. We know how many grams are in a pound. We know how many ounces are in a pound. We know how many pounds are in a 30-pound case. So you can switch all you want between those. If you felt like changing this to quart, that's switching between weight and volume, right? Different unit type, which means you want to check your equivalency and make sure there's one set for volume to weight, which for sugar there is. For most of the ingredients in meez, there is some kind of equivalency in there. But you do want to check, because this is going to be something that could, in theory, mess it up if you don't have an equivalency in there. If you buy it by the pound and you want to count it by the quart, and there's not a way for meez to know the connection, it'll pose a problem. So just check if you're changing this unit of measure between unit types. Check, okay? Sergio, any comments, questions on that?
So if there's something that I buy by the pound, like you're putting in their sugar,
Yeah.
then that would be something that we should be weighing when we count it, or I guess the best guesstimate if they say that looks like 10 pounds.
That would be the ideal.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if you can keep things in the same unit type, you're gonna make your life a lot easier. If you leave it as case, it means that if somebody puts in a 1, it's going to count a 30-pound case. What you don't want to do is type in just the word case. You'll see their error message shows up here. Meez doesn't like just the word case or the word each a lot of the time. It wants you to define it. And I'm going to actually show you a really cool trick. I might as well jump into that right now, actually. I'm going to remove these real quick. And I'm going to put in corn tortillas. That's not the right one. I got 2 in here. All right. I have a product, corn tortillas, that I want to add to my count. And you'll see that this is how it comes off of the invoice. Case equals 12/60 each. All right. So what this means is there's 12 packs in a case, and there's 60 tortillas in a pack. How would you like to count this? Some people will leave it like this, and they'll say, I want to count by the case. So you can leave it there. Some people want to count by the pack, or the bag of 60, right? So how do you best do that? Well, if you clicked on just bag, it's not going to be good. You're not going to want to do this because it's not going to know automatically how many pieces you're talking about when you talk about a bag. So here's my trick for you. I'm going to go to any ingredient. I just clicked on honey earlier. I'm in this ingredient. I'm going to click these 3 dots. And I want everyone to do this with me if you have yours up, because I think it's going to be really helpful down the line. I'm going to click these 3 dots here, and I'm going to click copy ingredient. And I'm going to call this pack size definer. All right. So I'm using one of my tools in meez. And I have this in a new tab, and I'm going to basically define a new pack size for my corn tortillas using this ingredient, and specifically using this purchase unit. So I'm going to type in bag, and I'm going to give it a total. It's actually 60 each, right? I'm basically typing in exactly what I'd want my team to read so that it makes their counting experience as easy and as foolproof as possible. And I think bag, parenthesis 60 each, will make a lot of sense to them. They'll understand that that's talking about a bag within a case. But you'll notice there's no purchase unit available, it's going to ask me to add a new unit. And all I'm doing is clicking that, and then I'm defining it by saying, I'm talking about 60, essentially 60 tortillas, right? That's how many come in a bag. That's how many my core tortillas, the case had. It had 12 60s. So now that I've done that, I'm actually going to hit refresh. As soon as I define that, I should have this available now. There it is, bag 60 each.
And how is it calculating the cost from that, Doug?
Well, if you remember the corn tortilla on the invoice, the case was 12/60 each. So meez basically thinks you're talking about 12 times 60 pieces, whatever that is. Can't remember.
So it's already counting that as 720 tortillas.
Exactly. It's already saying you have 720 tortillas in your walk-in for 41.87. And now you're telling me, if you don't mind, I'd like to count by 60 each, so that when you put in a 1 here, it's going to count 60. If you put in 2.5, it's going to count whatever 60 times 2.5 is. And then that way, it's going to just make your life a lot easier with your counters, and it's going to make the math work. That's the trick, right? Is how can we make this as easy as possible for my team, but also it calculates correctly. And I've done this a bunch of times with our customers with helping to set up inventory lists. And I think this purchase unit like tool to be able to say, okay, it's we want to count cups or like quart containers, and each sleeve is 150. So you can see I already defined a couple in here, but I want to do a new one, 150 each. All you got to do is just type in whatever you want it to read, click the add new unit, and then define it as you would. And the definition, just you want to keep it in line with how you're buying it, right? That same unit type. If it's by weight, ideally define it by weight. If it's by volume, okay?
Yeah. Does that make sense to everybody? I want to pause here for a second because I feel like this is when myself, Doug, Dan and Nicole who are on the call who work with people as well. At post inventory, we get a lot of questions about this. We get a lot of, the unit of measure just doesn't seem to be coming through. So I'd love to open this up for a quick minute, or we'll have more time for questions later. And I want to make sure that what Doug just showed, it's kind of a workaround, just a very useful tool. If this is making sense for anybody, or if anybody has specific questions about how to use this, about how to define a unit of measure. Specifically, in this case, Doug is talking about counting.
Do you have an example of an item you want us to kind of talk about? Like you buy an item by such and such case, and you want us to put it in there. Let us know. Put it in the chat. One common one that we see a lot of is number 10 cans, right? So I pulled one up earlier, tomato puree. All right, so you'll see that tomato puree, a lot of people will see this as 6 number 10 cans, comes off the invoice. Sounds good. But what a lot of the team members who count, they'll put in a 1 to mean 1 can, right? When they're counting these products. But that's actually going to calculate 1 case. Okay, so what do? Instead, I want to switch this, and I'm going to type in can. That's a bad idea, right? Because what we don't want to do is just have it say can, like bag, like each. These are all undefined. We actually want to say number 10 can. That's going to be the right choice if we want to count by the individual can. So you can, again, switch these up if you want. Just make sure you define it. You just make sure you put in, either there's a definition already in here, meaning number 10 can, that's already in the system. But if you want to create that custom one, go to your pack size definer and, type in can and then you can put in parentheses and you can put in, 96 ounces or whatever it might be and create it that way. Okay. But just know you have a lot of options here. If I type in case, you can see there's a lot of case sizes already in here in my account. A lot of these will be in your account too. If I type in ounce, a lot of different options. So yeah, you can customize this as much as you need to, essentially. All right, let's go back and put that number 10 can in here. All right, so we added a new list. We added 2 items. I'm going to just kind of do one other quick thing, which is one of the best things about meez really differentiates us from other inventory platforms is the ability to add recipes. So you can count not just ingredients, but also prepped out items that you're, quarting out or putting in pints in your walk-in. So for instance, if I type, what's the one I had? Salsa Verde. If I find my recipe for salsa verde, I can now add that into my list right alongside my ingredients, just like anything else. Now you'll notice the unit of count here is different than the ones came up. This is by gram. And you might wonder why it's pulling in from gram. Well, if I click on the recipe itself, you'll notice the yield over here is in grams. That's where it's coming from, okay? It's coming from this unit of measure here. Now, might not make sense for you to count this by grams because you might not want to weigh each, pint of salsa verde. You might just want to count by the pint. All you got to do is click this and type in pint, okay? And now it's in there. But remember, we just switched unit types. We went from gram, which is weight, over to volume, which is pint. What do we do now? Just like we would for the sugar earlier, we would want to go to the recipe page for salsa verde. And just like the ingredient pages, we have a U of M equivalency here. And what we want to do is we want to define how many grams are in a pint for this particular product. So throw one on the scale when it's full and come in here and you can add it in here. Right now it's 8 ounces to 1 cup. This might end up being, let's say 932. Actually, one really cool trick you can do. Well, let's do this. I would say just do it in your kitchen. Just try to make it exact. But basically, like if this were 932 grams and you knew this was a 3-quart batch, there you go. Just put in the weight over the total yield. It's what batch size it is in volume. There you go. Put in 3 quarts. Now it's saved. Oh, didn't save that.
Yeah. I think it's good to note too that the unit of measure equivalency that you see there is within ingredients and within recipes. Now, Meez's database of ingredients has a lot of those pre-populated so that we know that a cup of sugar is different than a cup of water, and those are conversions that you can basically bank on. If you see that 8 ounces equals a cup with no each, or with that each just reading without a number, that is what we call a standard unit of measure conversion, and it's what it defaults to when you create a recipe. So you want to be careful for that. Obviously, we can't take a guess at every recipe, so it's got to start somewhere. But if you want to use that unit of measure equivalency in your recipes, you will most likely be toggling off that standard. If you could show that again, Doug, just go into edit, and you'll see that it's usually defined there. That means 8 ounces to a cup. It's based on water. When you turn it off, then you can enter in your own equivalency.
One other kind of tip on this you can go into is the each. So what does an each mean in this case? Well, for a lot of people, it means kind of portion size. How much is going into each portion? For salsa verde, maybe not. But, you can imagine for, let's say, prepped out proteins like chicken cutlets, you might want to count that by the portion. But your yield might be in weight. You can then put in, 8 ounces under weight equals 1 portion. And that way, when you count in your recipe, you can count by the portion, okay? So that's totally possible as long as you have the equivalency set. So I think a lot of people will come away from this probably a little like, okay, equivalencies are really important. I know that much, but it's going to depend on like the particular item you're talking about. Definitely reach out to us if you have any questions about recipe that you're working with or an ingredient you're working with and how it relates to how you count it. If you're at all confused, we have a great support team to kind of walk you through these steps. But the nuts and bolts of it are, remember that an equivalency is basically weight to volume to each. If you decide you want to switch between them, meaning you buy it by weight and you want to count it by volume, or you buy it by the piece and you want to count it by weight, just make sure there's a connection there. And you do that on the equivalency tab.
Awesome.
All right. Think about
now. I love the fact that we can count recipes here too. A big part of the inventory sheet that I was showing was, we based it on everything that we sold in the store, which about 50% of that was prepared foods, items that we made in the house. So whether it was hummus down to, an 8-ounce container, or meatballs by the pound, anything like that. So I know Doug has already touched on bringing in that salsa verde. I think this is a feature that, for me, in the world of specialty retail and prepared foods that I operated in 10 plus years ago, this is huge to be able to have the cost of my recipes down to the penny and see adjustments on them that are made in, then we had those costs would be out of date by months and months and months because they didn't get updated by the constantly changing price of foods. So can you explain a little bit how in that salsa verde, Doug, if there's an ingredient in that recipe that goes up in price,
Yeah.
what is the impact of that in our inventory across, anywhere that, obviously we've talked about menus before, anything like that.
Yeah, I mean, just to, in case, yeah, I guess we didn't really go over this, but basically what you're looking at in your salsa verde recipe here, or any recipe you have, is just a series of ingredient pages, right? And each of these pages is, in theory, can be linked to an invoice item that you're buying in. If you're using invoice processing, or you just want to add the cost manually, you can do that too. But if I click on any one of these ingredients, that's my purchase unit, and that's my cost for this particular location. If I'm linking this to an invoice and this goes up to $15 per the gallon, that'll directly impact my salsa verde recipe. The cost of garlic will go up, as well as any other recipe. See, I have 26 recipes over on that are using peeled garlic right now. Every one of these recipes is going to get updated with the new cost. And your inventory is going to be more accurate, right? Because when you inventory this salsa verde, the total cost per gram or per, ounce or per pint is going to fluctuate. And which means that your inventory is going to be updated based on the granular changes to each of these ingredients. So this is really the crux of it, right? You don't want to have to sit here and go, okay, did I update peeled garlic? Did I update jalapeno this month? Why do I have to update this every single month? Isn't there a better way to do this? And the
Yeah.
answer is yeah, we want to link this to
And so all those recipes that peeled garlic was in, if they were also in my inventories, would also be updated when that price gets updated.
absolutely.
That's awesome. That's such a world of difference.
Yeah. All right, it's 12:30 our time. Do you want to start a count real quick and show the next state of things?
Yeah. I also wanted to no, go ahead and start the count. I think it's something
Absolutely.
that we'll probably see in the count. Yeah.
Questions when okay. All right, so I'm going to do something. I'm going to be quick about this just to let everyone know there's not enough time today to go into the analytics portion of this, meaning the data we're going to see after we submit a count. We're going to do a separate call where we analyze that and we go over the steps to take. So I'm going to basically stop right as like the data, the moment the data is available, because I want to show you this next state, which is, okay, I feel like my inventory lists are set up. I'm done with that. I'm going to click begin new count. When I do that, everything changes in terms of the count progress. They all say pending, and you'll see the button here says cancel count. So if I need to cancel it, I can cancel it anytime. You'll see now I have all my lists kind of sit pending. And now if I click back to my fridge, there's now 3 columns. Before there was only 2. There's an item name, and now there's a place to put my quantity, and now an account unit. So remember, the count unit's what we set up. Now there's a place to put quantity. So now I can count my tortillas by the bag. So if I have 6 bags, now I do that. If I have, 8 number 10 cans, I do that. And if I have 2 pints, I do that. Perfect. And what if you realize you messed up and you need to add something that's in the fridge that wasn't in there before? You do have a search bar here that you can search the account to add whatever else you want. Okay. Now, the important thing to remember is I'm going to hit submit count right now, and I'm only submitting my sheet. Now you see that changed. Remember what I said earlier about I was coming back to the template. One really important nuance to Meez is that as soon as I started that count, what Meez did was it created copies of all these templates. And I'm actually committing numbers to each of these on the copy, okay? And that means that if I were to add a new item to this sheet on the fly, let's go back to sugar again. Okay, and then I type in my numbers and hit submit count. What I did was I added that to the copy. If I click edit template on the inventory, I'm back to those two. Okay. So a common thing people will think is that they're updating these lists on the fly and it's saving it. It's actually only saving it for that one instance. It's if you add it from the not from the template, like you don't click these three dots, it's only going to add it to the count as in progress. Okay. So you just have to remember to go back and you'll add it to the template after the fact. Basically, what I'm going to do next. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, question, if you can click back into the fridge and back to our friends the tortillas. So I know we're counting by the single pack here, and say I'm very high volume, I'm going through tons of tortillas, and I've got loose bags, but then I've also got a stack of 12 full cases. Can I enter that item twice, or do I just need to count by the bag how many items are there?
Yeah, really good question. I'd probably suggest we want to add another line. There isn't, you can see there's not like another column to add, more quantities. So what we would do in this case is type in corn tortilla, and you'll see that the case automatically comes in because that's again the pack size was case, and then you just want to say, okay, I got one case of that too.
Yeah.
And now this will all get aggregated later on. It'll tell you how many total tortillas you have.
Yeah. And since you're adding it on the fly, it just drops it on the bottom. But then in edit mode, we could then put those two together. So we want to make that on purpose so that people see tortillas by the bag, tortillas by the case.
Yeah. And if you're starting out and you didn't really get very far, you can always click cancel count, start over, click the three dots, and then let's add corn tortillas again. And let's move that, up a little bit like that. And then hit back and then begin new count again.
Got it.
Yeah, so basically once you begin a count, whatever edits you make on the count sheets are going to be for that moment, unless you click these three dots and actually edit the template. So I would suggest being careful changing these units. These are available to change mid-count. I think in an ideal world, this is all set up and your team is counting the way you've assigned them to count and they're not changing it on the fly. Ideal worlds don't usually exist, so it will happen. I'm sure people will change it. A little bit of training goes a long way, and just teaching people, okay, if you're gonna put this in here, check with the manager first, or make sure that you're sticking with the same unit type. Again, these things can require a little more time just to teach. I want to again plug our support team and our walkthroughs. If you need any video walkthrough assistance that you want to pass to your team members, let me know. We have an onboarding plan that we can sign up any of your team members for, and they can just watch the kind of walkthroughs and learn all about this stuff. All the videos in total take probably about like 20-25 minutes to view. There's like 8 of them. They don't have to view all of them, but I think it would be helpful if you know certain people are going to be conducting inventory and you want them trained. Highly recommend it. So just reach out, let us know. We can help you out there.
Cool. One thing that I know we discuss, and I think we see it a lot from specifically our restaurant customers when counting inventory, is different. You were calling them different types of units of measure, different dimensions of units of measure too. There's mass, volume, and then count, how you're counting things. And what do we see more, or what is good practice when it comes to, what items should get weighed, what items can be counted by volume, what items by cases, and defining those cases. I know for volume, it's something really important is cooks on the line, wrapping up their station for the night. I mean, sometimes things like that are inventoried almost weekly, if not daily. And those are the things that can be counted. Usually on the line, you're breaking down pans, right? And I'd love to point out, if for customers that aren't aware, Meez has all your restaurant hotel pans broken down into volume. So we know what a 2-inch third pan holds in volume as opposed to a 6-inch third pan, or a 6 pan, or a 9th pan, as Doug is showing them there. So that can often be when people are closing up the line, the drawers in the line. I have a 6 pan, I have a 9th pan, I have a third pan of this, can be a great way to count by volume. And then, of course, things like your proteins, your caviar, your truffles, you're going to want to count down to the gram or weigh them, of course. So, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I usually tell people don't try to change your operations too drastically when bringing this on, because at the end of the day, kitchen life is pretty structured. People are set in their ways. If you can mimic what's happening in the kitchen by constructing meez to kind of reflect that, that's gonna probably be easier in the long run. And meez is really built for that. There's a lot of customization that you can do with meez. So why not make it reflect the reality of their kitchen, which means how do people instinctively count? If they count, chicken cutlets by the hotel pan, put the unit of count as a hotel pan. If they count it by portion, do it by portion. Prepped items are mostly in pints and six pans. Count them by pints and six pans. Things that you're buying in that are, proteins, like, buying ground beef, you're buying it by the pound. Weigh it. Count it by the pound. It's going to be much easier than having to, change it just for the sake of changing it. So that's my advice, I think. And, does that make sense to you, Sergio?
Yes, it does. Does anybody else have any thoughts about how your teams count inventory, depending on what they're counting, what section they're counting, what station they work in the restaurant? Love to hear if anybody has thoughts on that, if there's consistency, if it's all over the place.
Right. While we're waiting.
Chatty bunch.
Let me go over just a couple of final pro tips for those who've made it this far. I think we still have a good amount of people. Yeah, we do. I'm going to just quickly put some numbers in here, hit submit. I want to show you a couple states. Okay. Submit. Unfortunately, you have to submit all of your sheets in order to get to what I call the pending state, which is ready. So all of my sheets have been completed, meaning I hit submit on each of them. And you'll notice that this button here says submit count. This is where I highly recommend your team stops and you kind of let the program digest the information you put in. Because what's happening right now is with every single one of these lists having said completed, in the meez analytics portion, which is, if you click this view report, it brings you to the analytics page and the tab would be inventory here. You're going to see your count actually show up, even though you didn't fully submit it, meaning you didn't post the numbers. They're actually going to still show up, and they're going to show up with a pending state. And if I were to export this, it'll look kind of like this. And under column J, you'll see the status is pending. This is crucial because guaranteed there's going to be a slip up, right? Someone's going to type in 10, meaning 10 cases, and they meant to type in 1, or whatever the thing that will happen. And you're going to end up with one value that's $40,000 and it's supposed to be 400. You'll be able to catch that if you leave it on that page and you just inspect the pending values. And again, we're going to go into how to analyze the analytics because it does require a little bit more time than we have today. But essentially, you'll be able to see the total cost and you'll be able to pick out items that are wrong. And then what you'll be able to do is go back, find the sheet that it was on, click back into it, and change the numbers, and then hit resubmit the count. And then it'll
go the number or change the count unit as well, right?
Sure. Yeah.
Both corrections can be made.
Do it. Yeah. If you realize that you should have had, this was 6 and 6, and it should have been 6D brioche buns, you can just do that. Or if it was 6 pounds and it should have been, 6 2-pound blocks, you can do that. So either way, once you hit submit count again on this, now that sheet's resubmitted. And again, wait. Go to your analytics in a few minutes. Usually takes about 5 minutes for it to load. You'll start seeing the numbers switch up. Okay. and then you can download it and look at the pending state in Excel, or you can do it right from here. But again, we'll go into more of this detail. We went over a lot today, and I think going over analytics on top of all that's just too much. So we'll save that for another time. But I wanted to really emphasize this moment. So submit count is at the top, and all of these are completed. That's where you want to pause and not click the submit. As soon as you click the submit, it's going to say, are you sure? And if you were to say, yes, I'm sure, those numbers are in.
Yeah.
They're locked. So
think of submit as posting. We might actually change that to read, put like when you post an invoice in your accounting software, anything like that, it's posted. It's now historical record that cannot be changed. So it's good to keep an eye on that, do your diligence, check it through before you hit that final submit, or you may have to start from scratch.
exactly. All right, cool. So we went over a lot today. And again, all this has been recorded, so we'll be able to follow along after the fact if you want to kind of use this to review. But yeah, any thoughts, Sergio, on this process? Would this been helpful for you in the past with your Excel sheets, or what are your thoughts?
100%. I mean, saving the most importantly is just starting with a spreadsheet where the costs are up to date. And I know this is something that if you're brand new to meez, the cost, the pack units, the case sizes is like that drinking from a fire hose feeling when it starts to click. And Dan, one of our panelists, who you will most likely talk to in support, if you're having issues there, is going to help you untangle that. All of us are here to help you, understand that unit of measure, case counts, case definitions. And once you're there, then you're going into the inventory, something that you may not even have to think about until you're in the 20s of the month, which again, in my world was unheard of. We were thinking about inventory on the second because we knew how painful the last inventory count had been. How can we improve that? How can we not be looking for cost in the middle of the night and keeping that up to date? Here, if you're using meez and you're bringing in your purchases regularly, you're going to start off with an inventory sheet that's already up to date. You're going to look at it. You're going to start scrubbing it, do some test counts, and cut that process down. We're going to have a special guest on our next webinar where we review the analytics in 2 weeks, who's going to talk to you all about counting in meez. He's been using it at 5 or 6 locations now for months and months, if not a year now. And yeah, I think we can definitely talk about and troubleshoot just about anything that's happening in your inventory.
Got a couple questions that are coming in, so keep them coming. Surely there's more. Gustavo, all count sheets need to be completed in order to submit a count. That is correct. Yes, this button will not change to submit until all your lists have the completed sign. If you don't want to count, you can always just click 0, or just click into it and just hit put zeros in there, hit submit count, and that way you just like move on. Some people will do inventory so frequently that it's really for prepped items on the like day-to-day or like every other day basis, and then at the end of the month they do the big inventory. That's fine. It's just going to give you a null value for these, and you can just focus on the items that have cost. But yes, you won't be able to submit this until all of these have the status completed. And then yep, no problem. Another question, maybe I missed it, but what if we get the same item from more than one company? Yeah, good question. So you buy sugar from GFS and Cisco, depending on who's got the better deal. If you buy them in and you're linking them to invoices, the invoice ID number will automatically update based on the most recent invoice. So if you bought Cisco today and the invoice came through, this information would all update and you'd have your Cisco information there. If you buy GFS next week, it'll change the cost for you automatically, which means from an inventory perspective, this cost will just change for you and your updated inventory will adjust. Now, most people don't really worry about having 2 cases of sugar, one that's slightly different cost than the other one. It's kind of it's a lot to manage, to be able to manage the 2 different inventory items with 2 different costs. You can do it, of course. You could create an ingredient called sugar (GFS) and sugar (Cisco), and have those both in inventory. But it's opening a bit of a can of worms, I think, in my opinion, is probably not worth the time spent managing that. But yeah, Sergio, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the can of worms on that would be then, are you then creating a situation where your cooks might be confused when they see sugar on a recipe? Oh, did you mean the GFS sugar, the Cisco sugar? You've only separated them because you might have a different cost.
Yeah.
So with an item like that, Meez is showing you the most recent cost, um, it rather than an average cost. So the cost was logged in for the other vendor, but you're now showing the most recent cost. Sugar probably wouldn't be the example, but let's talk about something like olive oil, where you do buy specifically a different brand of olive oil because you like to use that one on the line for cooking, and this olive oil is more for finishing. In that case, then I say yes, create a second ingredient, take your extra virgin olive oil ingredient and copy it like Doug had shown, and create that copy as, call it extra virgin olive oil for finishing, or the brand name if you want. That way your cooks will be counting a completely different product, and they know that you really do want that olive oil counted separate than the other one. As opposed to if it's sugar and you're okay with that price discrepancy when you purchase, you're going to be looking and buying the less expensive one. But when counting, your count is going to be based on the last price paid.
Yeah, so basically what you're saying, Sergio, is like when you look at your ingredient list, don't think of it as your different vendor items, but maybe more of your brands. Like, okay, we buy, two different kinds of honey, even though they're, sometimes interchangeable. Maybe we do create two different ingredients because there is a price difference. And also when they're conducting inventory, they might be different pack sizes. Nicole just pointed out, if you're buying in honey and sometimes it's in, gallon jugs, sometimes it comes in, 14-ounce containers, you'd probably want to put them in as two different inventory items because they are two different pack sizes. So you want to count them, separately, right? So
Yeah.
again, there's a lot of flexibility here. So again, I come back to the idea of try to make it mimic the reality of your kitchen and the reality of your cooks' lives, because that's just going to make your life easier in the end. If you can kind of keep things, easy for them and make sense in terms of what's happening in the kitchen, you're going to run into far fewer problems.
Yeah. And just to double click on what Doug said, that's something that I talk to customers about all the time when they're building their first inventory sheets. Call the sheets exactly what you call them in the restaurant. You call it the downstairs walk-in, then call it the downstairs walk-in. You call it the low boy at the end of the line, call it that. That's what your cooks know. That's what they're going to count. So that makes it nice and simple. Same thing when we talk about count units and recipes, whatever. Just you want to use the language that's being used in the kitchen, the same terms, keep not changing their world, but getting you the outputs that you need.
Yeah, exactly. All right.
All right.
Any last thoughts, Sergio? Any last questions? Anyone else or comments, tips from your world's inventory? No? All right.
All right. We've covered a lot of information. There will be a recording sent out to everybody who was on the call or who registered. In 2 weeks, we will be going into the analytics of inventory, how to take the counts and see that table of analytics and how to drill into it, how to really leverage those analytics to make smarter purchasing decisions, to streamline your inventory. And we all know that inventory is a very different beast based on what kind of operation you're running. As I alluded to a bit, or you may know about my background, as I went from mostly a career in restaurants where the rule of the land is order lean and keep your inventory as lean as possible at all times. And then I made a switch into the world of retail, which if anybody has done that, then inventory is completely different because you need to have an abundance of product on the shelf. And if that's something anybody's experienced, I'd love to chat about that sometime because it took me a while to wrap my head around that and then run a successful retail business that didn't look like our kitchens, how I was trained to make a kitchen walk-in look, which was bare bones, lean, only by what we ordered. So thank you all for coming. And again, check out the Meez community under the webinar section. You will see recordings of past webinars and upcoming webinars. And we hope to see you guys in 2 weeks at the next one where we will dive into the analytics of this.